We're discussing the Chief Marketing Officer role with two CMOs from very large organizations. Suzanne Kounkel, she is the Chief Marketing Officer of Deloitte, and Norman de Greve, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of CVS Health. Welcome, both of you. Suzanne, please tell us about your role as CMO of Deloitte, and tell us about Deloitte.
We're the largest professional services organization in the US. But a little bit about what Deloitte means so that you'll sort of see the way it might color some of my answers to the questions. I'm obviously a B2B CMO. We have about 120,000 people in the US and about 330,000. So Norm and I would share, a very big employee base. We serve clients, helping them solve their, most complex set of business challenges, as well as stepping into opportunities and shaping their industries and functional areas. So because of that, we have a very wide set of capabilities and services that we offer to the marketplace.
Norman de Greve, tell us about CVS Health and your role as the Chief Marketing Officer.
Most people know CVS because they know our stores, 10,000 pharmacies across the country, within a few miles of most of the people in the country. And that is a big part of our business, a very important part of our business. It is also less than half of our business. And what many people don't know is that we play in a lot of areas of the healthcare space. So for example, we own Aetna, the insurance company. We own Caremark, which is a pharmacy benefits management company that helps control the costs of medication for companies and people. And we own a few other companies. And it's actually taken us to become the largest healthcare company in the US. And just last week, Fortune said we were the number 4 company on the Fortune 500. We're blending technology and human interaction in order to make healthcare easier for people. And so my job as a CMO is to be that voice of the consumer and to make sure that we're building the products and services that consumers want to engage in so that they become healthier, better for them, and better for us, of course, and then make sure that they're aware of those services so that they go to those services first. And so that's what I do every day.
Suzanne, the CMO role has been changing. Pieces of it have been almost kind of overlapping with the Chief Information Officer, and we have Chief Digital Officers. So really today, 2021, how do you define the scope of the CMO role?
The modern CMO basically has 4 facets to their job. The first is certainly growth driver, and that's changed pretty dramatically over a period of time. We've talked about a lot about that with the CMO set of responsibilities, but that is, absolutely 1,000% true today. We definitely think that a part of the CMO role is as an innovation catalyst, and specifically about digital. Norm talked about how dramatically technology is changing all of our businesses, and it certainly has changed the face of what we do as marketers. Obviously, brand storyteller and bringing creative to light and being the face of the organization, both internally and externally, is a big part of the CMO role. And last but not least is the capability builder, right? Making sure that we're doing the things that we can do with the CFO watching to get the highest return on the investments we make in marketing.
Norm, I'm sure that you have some thoughts as well on the scope of the role today.
I probably anchor a little bit more on the first one, which is to create customer-driven growth. Though I think every element you said there is exactly right. Most companies go through, and kind of my view, a few different stages. You start by finding an unmet need in the marketplace. You create a product or service to meet it. It's quite an entrepreneurial sort of idea. Then they go to the next stage of they say they have these customer relationships, and what else can they sell to them? And so now you've got kind of a marketing mindset, an innovation mindset there as well. And then many companies are really in this third stage, which is how do you drive operational profits out the company that you've built and the relationships that you have. And if I look at that curve, in each stage, marketing plays a really important role. Certainly at the beginning, that is what marketing does. We find an unmet need in the marketplace and we help create a product or service to meet it. In the second stage, we're really helping to figure out what else could we do to help those customers. But really importantly, in these big companies that are really focus on operational efficiencies with an analytic mindset. Very important, lots of value in this area. The marketer's job is to make sure that the company is also creating these products and services to meet unmet needs in the marketplace so that it can drive the next iteration of growth. So, like Suzanne, I like the way you said it, because I think that's a bit of customer-driven growth and a bit of innovation and a bit of capabilities as well. And you had one other one in there, I forgot it, but I like them all. I thought that was right. But it can feel a little different sometimes sitting at the executive table, because many people in that executive table are driving the operations and the finances and what's happening. And the marketer's job is to be a bit of that outside perspective to say, where do we have to go and why should we go there, and make sure that the company's focused on their customers.
The thing I would add, Michael, in response to your question is the CMO in the C-suite is, in my opinion, an important voice. And the thing that you need to do to land that the best is to make sure that you're at the highest intersection point between not forgetting that you do have unique superpowers, and that is the reason why you're in the C-suite, but also knowing that it is the set of capabilities that, as a general rule, most of the executives are least comfortable with. So you really have to be able to land your message in a way that can be heard from the various viewpoints. And I think that's something that, CMOs are trying to very actively, bridge that gap with respect to language and metrics and, being able to, kind of talk about the impact they're having through the eyes of the business.
That point is really, really important. And like I found, so for example, I started part of my career in management consulting, and I lean on that skill set an awful lot in the C-suite because it enables me to speak the language that the other executives are speaking in to connect with them. Now, what's also important is for me to realize the importance of creativity and bring that forth. But if you just go in and talk about creativity, they're not exactly sure what to do with you. And at the same time, there's somebody sitting next to you who has a bunch of ideas with exact profit dollars that can be driven. And so you have to do both. Now, what I also see happening is, to your point, so then the marketer wants to speak the business language. And where is that taking us? That's taken us to, I want to talk about ROI. ROI is an efficiency metric. It is not a business outcome. And I think actually there's been too much of a focus on ROI versus actually incremental profit dollars at a reasonable rate of return. Why are we focused on the rate of return versus the total profit dollars that we're bringing in? So I think in some ways we've had an overcorrection in marketing to focus on a metric that actually has harmed the growth of the company because we're focused too much on efficiency.
So how then do you think about the allocation of your budget as an investment, as you kind of look at both efficiency and then innovation, to Suzanne's original point?
So you can think about allocation of investment in a couple of different ways. Number one is the investment needs to produce a return generally this year, right? And most everybody in your organization has to deal with that, and you need to deal with that too. And so when you show up and talk about brand and the exciting opportunity to be associated with something, it kind of like, well, to what end? Now, what I will tell you is that if you want to drive the maximum return for your investment over multiple years, and I'm just talking about like 2 to 3 years, it takes you to a very different set of allocation of activities than it does if you say, I want to drive the return in a quarter. And so as an example, if I want to drive a return this quarter, I will focus on selling products that are already known to existing customers. Now, you can't grow a business just by focusing on your existing customers. And you have to grow out. And so you have to think about over a couple of years, what's the right allocation? And so when we look at allocation, it is in the idea of what's the best return for the money. But again, it's not just the percentage return, it is the total dollar return at a reasonable rate.
And I would just add that, over the brand to demand spectrum, we're constantly making choices about, depending on how the business is performing, right, to accelerate and make those shifts. I think the one thing that has changed pretty dramatically and that I've, learned very specifically in my role is that is a great place to tie in with the other executives, is to make that very explicit and known, and, kind of collectively agree that that's what we need at at this moment in time. And that allows for two things, right? It allows for that collaboration with the business. And it also allows for, we as marketers to then go do the things that we do particularly and uniquely well.
We have an interesting question from Twitter from Arsalan Khan, who's a regular listener and always asks great questions. So thank you for that, Arsalan. And he says, how do CMOs define innovation? And is the definition different from what IT and the CIO might think innovation to be?
I think that there are sort of two things that we think about with respect to innovation. One, we think about meeting our, clients / customers where they are, and as they're innovating and doing different things, like how do we innovate to be able to meet them where they need us to be. And we've certainly seen some very interesting things around, one of our mottos is, you don't go it alone in this world, right? So there would be very different things that we're doing today with respect to some of the partnerships and alliances and the co-collaboration inside and outside our organization. So certainly innovation is to respond to both the market needs as well as the things that are truly differentiated about who we are and how can we meet what the client, where they're at. The good news about innovation as well in today's parlance, in my opinion, is that it also helps again, I like, Norm, what you said about the return on investment being, a pretty narrow metric. However, a lot of the digital capabilities and innovative ways to deploy some of those assets help pretty significantly in that. So that's the other thing that we think about it is how are we able to reach more of the market faster?
Sometimes people can think of innovation as a new way of doing things and or an exciting new thing, whatever that might be. I think that marketers think about it first and foremost through a better way to solve customer needs. And I think it's actually quite easy for big companies to skip that part, to say, here's the thing that I want to do because if we can do it, we make a lot of money. And it's like, okay, well, that's great, but do customers want it? And so I think marketers are more likely to think about it customer in versus what we have out.
Is this notion of customer experience, which everybody's talking about. And as a practical matter, how much do each of you actually talk about, invest in customer experience? And by the way, what exactly is it anyhow?
If a CMO's job is to drive growth, and in that equation, building a brand is partly how you drive growth, then you can look today, and I've done this study multiple times, 75% of a brand is now built through experience. So if a CMO's job is to build the brand, then they better be spending a lot of time on what the experience is. They don't have to own it all, but they need to be working with people about how it becomes a great experience. And, so what is an experience? And it is very different depending upon the industries. In the service business, it's pretty easy. What's the experience? In a product business, it's the usage of the product. But they can get very different. There's just different ways to come at it. But I do think that you've got a digitally enabled consumer, low friction of information flying around. And if the experience is great, terrific. And if it's bad, then there's no marketing that's going to cover that up.
I love what you said earlier as well, is about, the way I think about customer experience is two things. One is, as a CMO, I can see things that others struggle to see in the business. I can also listen differently. And so really making sure that I contribute those things back to the business in a unique way is a key part of my role. But to your question about can it be owned by marketing, I think it can be led by marketing. But, I always say both in my personal life and my professional life, I say, life is lived in the small moments every day. And because of that, the experience has to be thought about and contemplated through the roles of every part of the organization and the talent experience. Otherwise, you can't ever land an authentic, repeatable customer experience that really engenders loyalty with customers.
That's such an interesting point. Authentic and repeatable customer experiences that engender loyalty. And I suspect how you each do that is very, very different because your businesses are so different. So how do you create repeatable experiences that are authentic, that engender loyalty?
Yeah, Suzanne, I'm actually interested on the like from a Deloitte standpoint. It's complex. You've got so many people. By the way, I'm sure they all believe they're super smart and have a great way of doing things. And so, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I always, when I'm sitting on panels with B2C CMOs, I always say, imagine a world in which your products walked and talked. So you're right, Norm, that it is harder. Like the repeatability to us gets down to a certain set of values that we want to make sure are present, and a set of things that are differentiated about who we are and the way we do the work we do. It is not necessarily to make everything 1,000%, 100% repeatable each and every time. But to be able to do that, and I know this is an area that I got some responses on LinkedIn when I talked about this talk, is that it does require for us digital innovation. And that digital innovation is really all about making sure that our humans can be more human at the time they really need to be. And so that's what we're always trying to do, is make sure people have the information, the guideposts that they need to be able to make choices in the moment, and that it's really sort of a value-based and responsive. Because one of the other things that we do believe is that, this set of complex and new business opportunities presents itself in a slightly unique way, client by client. So it is more about helping our people make choices in the moment than it is, sort of a repeatable, meaning exactly the same each and every time.
And, I was thinking about this at one point for, actually thinking about it still today, but about all of our stores. And so how do we create the right experience? And I remember thinking about Disney, which is just an organization that, of course, I admire a lot for what they've done. It still continues to be an excellent organization. The challenge that I noticed between my organization and Disney was that they have, in the US, 2 locations and I have 10,000. And so it's just really hard to get a culture through. Like, you could see it in 2 locations, how you do the onboarding, how you manage people every day. And what's really, in a similar way to what you're saying, made a difference for us is the idea of purpose. And we can have a long talk about that. But when you create a culture on similar to your values in a way of what you expect, what you believe, and how you want people to behave, then that's the best you can do. And I think that actually, in a rapidly changing world, that idea creates more unification and delivery of your brand than actually being prescriptive of exactly what to say and do in a moment. I mean, not to go too far down this path, but actually, if you look at the way the military is changing, the way they work, it used to be command and control, and now it's very different. And it's all along this idea: know exactly the rules of the road and values and how to operate, and be prepared for a situation that you're going to have to make the decisions.
And I actually think that was again, in a lot of terrible things that happen in times of COVID, I think that muscle really got strengthened because, Norm, you would have seen this in spades, right? Things were moving so fast, just generally, and then specifically by geography and by, certain demographics and all that sort of thing, that getting comfortable with that notion of, things needed to change and it needed to be able to have decision making in the moment was actually a really critical muscle to develop.
One of the things that COVID did for us that at the very beginning we really changed is my role became not just the voice of the customer, but the voice of the employees. So we were doing surveys all the time, figuring out exactly what the employees need. And we had PPE, protective equipment that we had to get to people. We had to think about our operating procedures, all that stuff, the safety. People felt really stressed going to work. And so that we were kind of we were listening more than ever to our employees and then helping to make changes. I wonder if that was the same for you, given your dispersed workforce.
Yeah, it was absolutely the case. And we had to really radically change the way we communicated internally and externally. And one of the things I was most proud of our executive team was that they were really clear from the very beginning about, I think that the natural tendency is for leaders to speak with authority and conviction. And what our executives did was they spoke with conviction, but they said, we only know what we know today. So we're going to make it as clear as possible, as simple as possible, but do what you need to do and let us know how it reacts. So Norm, we absolutely did a lot to really listen to our clients and our people.
You mentioned the term purpose. I think Norm brought this term up earlier. And it seems evident to me as I hear you both talk that purpose and culture underlie a lot of how you both think about the world. But this term purpose and purpose driven has become a buzzword where it sounds really good, but it can be very vapid and devoid of meaning. And so what does it actually mean, and how do we bring substance to this concept of being purpose driven?
I think it's impossible to be a purpose-driven brand. You have to be a purpose-driven company.
Yeah.
And those are fundamentally different. A purpose-driven brand can make communications that are compelling and tear-jerking. They can maybe do CSR activities, which are also good things to do, but that doesn't make you a purpose-driven company. And to be a purpose-driven company, you need to meaningfully demonstrate your commitment to that purpose in a way that your customers care about and that your employees care about. And there's a long history about CVS. We don't have to go into that right here about the moves we've taken. But I think that the real reason to do it is to drive engagement for your employees, actually. People talk about customers buying from purpose-driven brands, and I do think that that's true, but only after your product or service meets their needs. And so once they meet their needs, then, yeah, they might make a choice to buy you. More importantly, demonstrating your commitment to your purpose gives your employees to something to rally around. And by doing that, you drive more engagement. And by driving more engagement, you drive more innovation, which drives more growth for your company.
Just two thoughts to add to that, which I think, the whole notion of it's got to be a purpose-driven organization, not brand, I think is absolutely spot on. The two things that I would add is that purpose is obviously who we are as an organization. And certainly, that has become really, it's always been true, but certainly with the agency that our customers and our people have today, they have shown and told us that they're very willing to vote with their dollars and their they'll walk if they don't believe that is the case. But just two things that I would say that are important about purpose is, one, I always say it's who you are when you think no one's looking. So you really have to embed purpose in everything you do. And lots of those things will be inconvenient, but that really shows who you are and what you believe in with respect to the purpose piece of that. And then the second thing I always say is that the CMO is disproportionately in a lot of organizations the voice of purpose, but it does because they have the responsibility to be a unique window into the organization with what you see. But again, I could not agree with Norm more. If every part of the organization doesn't believe in the purpose and know how to express that through the decisions they're making, purpose quickly falls apart.
How do you balance the desire to be purpose-driven against what ultimately has to be some cost associated with that, some reduction in your profitability, some quote unquote wasted money?
I see purpose as profitably improving the lives of people and improving communities. That if you do that, if you improve people's lives and you improve communities, then I think you can make money at it. And in fact, healthy communities and healthy people drive a lot of purchases. So it's good for everyone. The famous one on this front, Michael, is CVS's decision to stop selling tobacco, which was a sacrifice of $2 billion in annual revenue. So a lot of money that went out the door. And what we were banking on is that by not selling tobacco, we would build the business where we provide benefits to health plans and hospitals and other companies. And what I would tell you is we went down $2 billion in revenue because of that decision. And in the couple of years after that, we went up $16 billion in revenue because we showed our commitment to what was right.
I think too that it's, again, decisions that you will feel good about regardless of the, the implication, knowing that we have a business to run. I'll give you an example at Deloitte. When COVID first hit, our executive team, got together and basically said, this is a medical, at that point in time with the response, it was a medical situation initially. And we said, to be honest, our purpose is, to make an impact that matters. And our impact at that point in time was to help our clients and our employees be safe. We couldn't overreach past that. Otherwise, we would get ourselves into trouble. So we made very specific choices, similar, Norm, on a smaller scale, but we helped clients, we helped competitors who were embedded in our clients' operations if they couldn't have the technology capability and connectivity that we could because of choices we'd made about our infrastructure. Because we knew that our purpose was to make sure that people were stronger, faster, right? And so we were willing to assume any, kind of risk and short-term penalty, if you will, because we knew that longer term, we'd all be collectively stronger. Now, as that changed to a response type environment, then we started saying, okay, our purpose, impact that matters, is to help some of our clients get together in new and unusual ways in the marketplace. So we helped some of our hospitality clients who had a lot of call center capacity open because of what was going on in their industry, lean in with state and local governments to be able to use that call center capacity to get information out to citizens, right? And then ultimately, we think the third phase, which is unfolding right now, is all about thriving. And then our purpose, we do have a very real role to play and a significant role to play as we, set to challenge the next set of problems and opportunities. So it is about making decisions on an ongoing, in the moment basis with respect to your purpose. And it does lead you into certain actions. But I love the story about, CVS, and it took conviction and courage. And I think those are things that are, if you want to be a purpose-driven organization, you have to be able to say that you have courage and you have conviction.
It sounds like for both of you, the idea of community is foundational to this idea of purpose.
I think it is. We spend most of our time at our companies, and yet we choose our homes because we want to be in a community that really reflects what's our values and what's important to us. Well, shouldn't we be selecting a company that does the same thing? Because that is a community. And I do think that people are increasingly choosing their companies because of that. And I think companies have actually done a really good job. I mean, we can all go back to the Edelman Trust Barometer, a few years ago, and companies were terrible, and nobody trusted them, and I think they're coming back a bit. And so because they're demonstrating, you kind of look at like the Paris Climate Accord. The government pulled out, and the company said, "I'm going to do this." They really just stood up for what they wanted to do, which I thought was really interesting. And I was thinking about this, Suzanne, when you were talking, because I was thinking, I bet you that the purpose at Deloitte helps create a community and values that people feel proud of, and it helps with retention and engagement.
Absolutely. We did our 2021 marketing trends report, which we do, every year. And that came out very loudly and clearly, is that, people, trust is so paramount for people today. And they're just willing to vote either positively or negatively in that environment with both the companies that they choose to work for, and customers are more than willing to reward or penalize companies that they don't believe reflect the values that they want to see in the world.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the values at companies, because take our two companies, they're so large, and because we not only have to recruit from a huge population, we also have to serve huge populations. It actually takes us to a set of values that are reflective of kind of mainstream America in a way, in a good way, I think, not too extreme in either direction. And I think that's just really interesting. It's what's made many companies leaders in their industry.
We have a really interesting question from Twitter from Elizabeth Shaw, who says, how can marketing and the CMO be a catalyst for change in the company, not just for defining products and services, but actually helping drive change in the organization.
I went down a project a few years ago and I completely underestimated how important change management was. I didn't even underestimate it. I undervalued it. I was like, we're just going to get it done. Lucky for me, I was working with some people who were really helpful at helping me understand what was needed. And so think about what is really required for change management. Listening. Why, what's going on? How do you feel about this? What would be important to you? How can we make it better for you? And then communications again and again and again. Why are we doing this? Where are we headed? What progress have we made? And, you simply can't over communicate in change management. And I just think that that's actually core to what the skill set is of marketing. And we can communicate in a way that sometimes is more emotionally resonant, which we know drives memorability. And so that's helpful. I think that they're very closely connected.
Yeah, and I think it's why digital and analytics/insight have become such a big part of the CMO role, is that we can listen and engage differently and complementary ways to what the rest of the business does. So part of the role of the CMO is making sure, and Norm mentioned it earlier in our conversation, right, it is really bringing this outside in. And I do think, again, in COVID, many of us learned how to listen to our people very significantly as well. And so those are things that we want to make sure we do on an ongoing basis.
Suzanne raises something of a paradox for me, because she was just describing the power of listening through digital. But is there also a concern that digital creates a disconnect and a gap with the real people, because you're taking the tracks, the analytics and the data, but what about interactions with people?
Well, the thing I always say about digital is if you do it the right way, it actually makes sure that your people have the time and the space and the tools to do what they do best, which is to be human, right? So it's not about stripping the humanity out of your operations or your storytelling or whatever the case might be, right? It is all about making sure that when you're physically present with someone, with the customer, that you have all of the necessary tools, insight, information to be able to be very, very responsive in a very human way, to have all of the empathetic response that you can.
I love that. A good example for this is our pharmacists in our stores. We're deploying digital for consumers to order their prescriptions online. We're home delivery. We're deploying tools and technology in the pharmacies, and it's all so that we can free up the pharmacists so that they can have conversations with the most vulnerable patients, and because we know that can have a lot of impact. So I think it's a great example.
Suzanne alluded to this earlier, which is work is changing and life is changing. And so where do you see the world going over the next, pick a time, 6 months, year, and what are the impacts on your business and how you think about the CMO role and what your activities and investments will be?
We're doing a lot of work and thinking right now about what we're calling reimagining the experience, right? And what we're saying is that in a world in which you have choice between what is done digitally, virtually, or physically, how do we help people make those right choices? And, it's interesting because COVID obviously was a very, very hard time and had, disproportionate impact on various geographies and populations. And that will be true for the next, we believe it will be true in some way, shape, or form for probably at least the next 2 years. So making those choices is an interesting, kind of balance. And I would say that some of the things that we're trying to experiment with, one of the things that was wildly positive about a 100% virtual environment was the impact on our people and their personal lives. So the ability to be home more and to be present. And also the inclusivity of a virtual world, right? All of a sudden you could have many more people that weren't constrained by geography or, access or availability participate in things. We have all kinds of conversations that people could drop in and out of in a much more significant way than they could in a physical world. So how do you make sure that you pull the thread on making sure that those advantages continue, but balanced with the fact that as humans, one of the things that we do exceptionally well are really build deep, trusted relationships. So that's the way we're thinking about it, Michael, is what absolutely needs to be done to unlock kind of that human potential and that trust very specifically in a physical world. But how do you make sure that some of the things that we're very positive about being entirely virtual persists on an ongoing basis?
Norm, I have to imagine that for you, the change in the world is your reactions will be very different from Suzanne's in terms of the activities, because your businesses are so different.
Somewhat, but I do love that example, Suzanne, about the meetings. I mean, remember there used to be, how many people do we really need in this meeting? Is that too many people? There used to be a lot of thinking about that. Why are the meetings always so big? I mean, with Zoom, where nobody talks about it at all. It's like, who cares if there's extra windows on? It's fine for people to hear about this stuff. We're just going to have a conversation. And it's really true. It's made a huge difference. And it's really helpful for those people to hear the conversation live, which I think creates less telephone tag, of actually what the decision was. So I think that's a really good example. I think very similarly, COVID helped us to realize the power of the human connection. Mm-hmm. As we didn't see our grandparents, as we didn't see our friends, and we became really aware of how much we valued that. It also made us aware of how digital can make our lives so easy. We kept ordering stuff online and so everybody started going more digital. And so what I think we're going to see going forward is that combination of that realizes the power of the human connection and the convenience of digital. And you can see it, I think, in the workplace as people go back to work. Everybody's working on what's the hybrid model that makes the most sense. Nobody knows the exact answer. We'll evolve our way through here. But that model, to your point, Stan, like, it's just going to be less stressful because I can actually be home sometimes for my kids' teachers meeting and the kids' practice tonight. And I can be at work, and I don't feel like I'm missing a beat either way. So I think that's really, really good. And by the way, better for the climate. Then you think about health and what's really happening with health. I mean, we saw a rise in telehealth. There was this kind of like fringe thing called telehealth that all of a sudden people thought, well, maybe it's okay to use. It seems like a little bit more mainstream. And that's really going to grow. But I also think people really want the in-person meeting with their healthcare practitioner, because a human being that cares about you is a very powerful thing. And so we're going to see this combination go forward. It wasn't just about the acceleration in digital, which we've all talked about. It was actually about the acceleration in digital and the power of the human connection that we all realized.
So Arsalan Khan comes back and he says, CMOs alone can't change the organization. Who do you need to partner with to make your organizations better?
So the simple answer is yes. And I would say every member of the C-suite, but you have to have stronger collaboration, in my opinion, with the BU presidents. And that is a really important relationship.
What is an experience platform, and to what degree will experience versus ad platforms be part of the CMO strategy? Okay, so now we're really drilling into the weeds here.
Experience platform is typically thought of in the digital space as a place that creates the experiences for whatever that company wants to deliver, either service order prescriptions, or it could be engagement of some sort. And generally, it's a technology platform that can customize some content based on what it knows about people. The CMO needs to have a big role in the evolution of that experience platform to really deliver for consumers. But I think most CMOs should also realize that there's a skill set required that isn't in their organization and isn't in necessarily the technology organization either, that there are hybrid people called digital people that understand how to deploy technology that creates great experiences.
Norm, the thing I would add onto that, which was fabulous, is that that gives you a lot of insight. It's I call it digitally listening to because you can see customers directly interact and what they want and what they find useful and what they don't necessarily want. And again, I'm not veering into the directly attributed to a specific individual, but generally with respect to audiences. And the CMO does have a responsibility to make sure the rest of the business understands that feedback.
We didn't talk about metrics. How do you evaluate the success of a CMO?
I'm going to give you three. Growth of the company driven by marketing, team and capabilities and skills, and have you left the company better off than it was before you got there?
I love that. The only one I would add is engagement and loyalty.
And along those same lines, why is there so much turnover among CMOs? I was looking at some stats, and there's pretty high turnover in the CMO role.
An evolution in skill sets required to be CMOs, and CEOs not always knowing that there are multiple types of CMOs. Suzanne and I are two different breeds of the same thing, and CEOs don't always know that or what they're looking for. So I think getting some good advice when they're looking to hire a CMO would be helpful.
The thing I would add is just CMOs have to be able to speak to their superpowers in a way that the CXO audience can hear it.
What are those superpowers?
Oh, I think creativity. I think customer, engagement and loyalty. I think, really making sure that the value and the engagement of your internal population for those CMOs that own internal comms, all of those sorts of things, that particularly the creative storytelling and the digital innovation are huge things that the CMO uniquely brings to the table. I think, in today's world, brand, reputation, and risk are things that are of the top of the board agenda and certainly of the C-suite. And those are all things that are better understood, typically by the CMO than other executives.
And let me ask each of you the same question to finish up that I think is an important one. Norm, let me start with you. What advice do you have for other CMOs who are navigating periods of rapid change and trying to innovate during those turbulent times?
Have a vision for where you want to go so that you don't get pivoted all over the place during this change.
And Suzanne, you're going to get the last word on that same topic.
I think be clear about where the biggest difference you can make and make sure that that's well known throughout the organization.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We've been speaking with Suzanne Kounkel and Norm de Greve of CVS Health, and Suzanne is the CMO of Deloitte. Thank you both so much for taking time to speak with us today, and thank you to everybody who was listening. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Everybody, thank you for watching. Before you go, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button at the top of our website. We have great shows coming up. Check out CXOTalk.com. And we'll see you again very, very soon.